As much as possible, I try to limit how much I self-interrupt myself, and I try to train myself not to do that. I've got a great friend, Mark DiCiani. We don't see each other near as much as I would like to. Said something one day that really resonated with me, and he said, people think we need to try harder to focus to get better at focus. We really don't. In actuality, we need to become better at ignoring outside interruptions and stimulations. Welcome back to the Drum Show podcast. We're going to be talking about something that I deal with in every gig, and so many of my students deal with, and I spend time, we do in-person drum camps, I do live calls with my students in my online drum school, and there's so much time spent around this topic, and it comes up in so many different ways, and this is one of the ways that it's always been an issue, but I'll kind of walk you through the issue it was in my life and how it progressed and got worse to derail some of my gigs. I'm actually just going to read you the email that Matt sent here. That's how this podcast was started. I actually started just answering emails with voice message, and I had saved all those voice messages, and I was like, hey, let's do a podcast with this. And so I'll read you specifically his questions in his email. But at the drum camps, I spent a lot of time, and we spent a lot of time talking about how do we stay focused, whether that be stay focused while we're practicing, or stay focused while we're on the gig, or while we're doing a recording session, or even while we're listening to a podcast. Like, how do we improve that focus? Because so many people are finding that they feel way more scattered than they used to, and there's a logical reason for this. And by the way, if you want to check out the drum camps, we have a few spots left for. There's like two camps. We have a couple spots left, and the rest are sold out. So if you want those, I'd love for you to go check them out. The link is in this the description of this podcast. All right, so let's get to this topic of focus within your playing, whether you're on the gig, whether you're in your practice time. Because we have to have that. If we can't have that, we're not going to get better because we're not focused on what we're doing. And you'll notice it's not just a problem in your practice time, it's a problem throughout your day. We live in an interruption-laden society where this thing that I'm holding, which actually, let me put it on airplane mode before we get interrupted. That's what I usually do. Like, I keep mine on airplane mode or not on me half the day when I'm especially when I'm at work, when I'm practicing, those kinds of things. So let's check this out. It says, "Hey Stephen, first of all, love the podcast. Thank you. Been following you for a good few years and always appreciate your reflections on drumming, particularly the mental, educational, emotional side of it. I've been listening in earnest to some of the recent episodes as concentration and worrying about performance are battles I have been waging ever since I started my drumming journey. Although I'm feeling better than I ever have done about my drumming, I feel like one problem in particular is holding me back. So here's my question. How can I reduce brain farts? I find myself in a continual struggle to maintain concentration and keep intrusive, disruptive thoughts at bay when on stage. I've worked out that the mistakes that I make are almost always down to nerves, thinking negatively or worrying about how I'm being perceived or judged. I picked up one idea from Max Sansalone's excellent Lo-Fi DVD where he advises to realize you're having these thoughts and try to bring yourself back to listening and responding to the music you're playing, which helps. But still, every performance there are at least one or two, and I wish I could eliminate them and give the best account of myself possible. I take your and Mike Miley's point about accepting mistakes as part of the experience of playing live, but I was wondering if you have any nuggets of wisdom or practical advice on how to minimize them as much as possible. For me, they typically manifest as rushing and messing up transitions into fills. Would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks a million for everything you do, Matt." This is excellent. It's an excellent question. Okay, so I started playing professionally when I was 15. That's when I got my first paid gig. Then I started doing it full time when I was 19 on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And there were a few things that happened during that time in the environment I was in that changed how the gig went, and some of them don't have anything to do with drumming. Some of them were like, oh, smoking was outlawed in clubs. That was a game changer, right? All of a sudden, Red Bull was in what came around. Well, that was huge too, because all of a sudden the party went from here to way up here real quick. So there were things like that. But there was another thing that happened in the club, and that was they installed TVs in the club, and that had not always been the case. Now when you go into a club or you go into a bar, it's or a restaurant, it's like you have a hard time getting away from the screens. It's like, here's this distraction. We always have and it's not the screen's problem, it's just kind of what they bring with it. So we have this all time with us. I talk to my kids about this a lot. I'm like, look, we don't need that thing interrupting us. We're it buzzes and we're like this. It's like a dog. Well, hey, And that's our lizard brain. We're programmed to do those types of things, beeps, buzzes, alerts, those types of things. Used to, that was a survival mechanism, right? But now it's led to, we are in a constant state of distraction. So it really keeps us from being able to dive into a deep level of work and be able to do that distraction free. How do we combat that? Well, I wish I could say, oh, you just need to concentrate harder at your gig. I wish it was that easy. But for us to get better at this thing of focus within our playing, whether it be practice time or whether it be on a gig or a jam with some friends, those types of things, recording session, you come to a camp, people that come to my camp, I'm like, hey, I really don't need you checking your phone 54 times in an hour session. That's distracting for the person teaching it. When you're listening to someone on stage, maybe give a presentation or something, imagine having hundreds of people out there doing this constantly. It's distracting for the person that is also speaking or whatever. If you're a musician on stage, when the audience is sitting there and they're just constantly on their phone, it's a distraction to the musicians on stage, So when you're watching an artist, it's always good to make it a point to like, hey, put your phone up for a while, We did one gig and it was in, I think it was in Ohio, maybe Columbus, Ohio. And the promoter said, he's like, man, I looked out there, no one was on their phone, He said, we've never seen a show like that where they were so engaged watching the show that they weren't on their phone. And not that was anything special to us. It was just like, oh, wow, that is a different thing. Like that is something different. So this is not a podcast and an episode about, oh, wait, throw your phone away. It's not that. They're interwoven into our life at this point. And I think they're great tools, but we have to keep them as tools. Okay, so where does this distraction come with in our plan? I can give you tons of books and resources and studies and those types of things. I know whenever you hear like, oh, study online, that means you made that up. But no, seriously, I spend so much of my time reading. I've got a book sitting here on the floor. It's a Rick Rubin's book on creativity, and I have a pen with it, and I have paper, and I'm constantly reading. I have a list of 52 books now on a PDF, and they're sitting on the piano in front of my desk, and I have to go through them in that order. I'm a very diligent reader. I always have a nonfiction and a fiction going. I read fiction before I go to bed to help my brain kind of let go. If you're wondering what fiction I'm reading right now, it is the short stories of Hemingway. Then it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So what do we do? How do we combat this, not just in our practice time, but kind of in our day? Because it creeps into my work too. So when, as much as possible, I try to limit how much I self-interrupt myself, and I try to train myself not to do that. I've got a great friend, Mark DiCiani. We don't see each other near as much as I would like to. He's at the Philadelphia School of the Arts and College of the Arts, University of Arts, I'm not sure what it is. And he is head of their percussion department now. He used to be head of the whole arts department, I think. But he said something one day that really resonated with me. And he said, people think we need to try harder to focus to get better at focus. And he said, we really don't. In actuality, we need to become better at ignoring outside interruptions and stimulations. So in other words, to get better at focusing on this podcast, I have to get better at ignoring that thing I just showed you, the phone. I have to get better at ignoring any other noises that are going on in this building and understanding that Grant, who's our community manager here, and he works every day here with me, he'll handle it. If somebody comes to the door, I don't need to worry about it. He'll grab it. If someone comes through this door and maybe he's grabbing a symbol for something he's doing out there, I need to get better at ignoring what's going on over there because this, right? So to focus more on this podcast, I really don't have to try to focus. If I can ignore the other things, ignore the internal thoughts, then it's much easier for me to focus. I'm getting back to the gig, so hang with me for a few minutes. Now, to do this, I talk a lot about this in my course called The Art of Practice. And it's all about the strategical side of how we practice. So in order to ignore distractions, yes, we have to get better at ignoring some of those distractions, ignoring some of the internal head talk. But as well, we have to get better at limiting the number of distractions we let into our sphere of influence for whatever time of day that is. If I'm doing project work, because I'm a drummer, I play in bands, I do recording sessions, I make online drum lessons, I run a business, because that's what this is, right? So there are some days where a lot of the day spent planning projects. I'm project planning, making sure the ball's moving forwards on these different things. If I'm doing that, guess what I don't want to have open? My email. Right? Anybody that's emailed me, you probably know I batch check my email. I'm not in there all the time. I will check it usually in the morning and scan it and make sure there's no fires burning, that the only way they got to me was through email. And if that's not the case, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to respond. I'm going to batch respond to that a couple of times a week. So I'm not going to keep that open. I don't have notifications from social media turned on. You want to see me jump at my phone? Let Facebook send me a notification. I'm jumping going, why did that come through? Like, there should be no notifications here. Something must have gotten turned on. I turn my phone on airplane mode, and I'll tell my wife, I'll say, hey, if you need me, call the studio. Totally would love to talk to you, but just call the studio. My phone's off. And then I have a little thing that I keep them, it's supposed to hold mail, but it holds my keys in my wallet, and then I put my phone there, and it's off. So as much as I can during the day, I'm actually turning my phone on airplane mode. When I'm with my family at dinner, my kids, so much so that my kids think there's something morally wrong to having like a screen at the dinner table. We don't allow them. And if they go to check a screen because their buddies are messaging them, I'll be like, well, what are we doing right now? Well, it's just I got to respond. I'm like, no, you don't have to respond. And the point is not that I don't want you on your screen or I'm trying to limit. The point is I'm trying to teach you, you are having quality time with people that have set aside time for you. So you going over there and interrupting that quality time to answer a text message about something that doesn't matter, they sent you a meme or something, that's called rude. You know what I'm saying? So for your playing, it's rude of you to interrupt what's going on. Now, what are some things that we can limit when it comes to interruptions? And some actions that I have taken to help, because I can remember, this makes me sound very like 80 years old. I'm really not. Technology's advanced very, very quickly. I held off on getting a cell phone for a very long time. I don't want people being able to, get a hold of me anytime. It wasn't something I wanted. Then texting came around. And I remember having my the first cell phone. It was like, one of those Breaking Bad phones. You got to press the button 18 times to get the, letter C. And I remember having that as plugged up, and I was sitting down to practice. And I had not trained myself to check the phone, right? That's what we do. We train ourselves. And I didn't have that habit loop going. And I remember getting done with my practice and going and looking, and I had like 15 missed calls from Kelly, my wife, and then a bunch of text messages. Are you okay? What's going on? And I was like, whoa, what happened? I called her. I said, hey, did something happen? Is everything okay? I was worried, like I'm getting shoes on, like she's had a wreck, something's wrong. And she said, no, you just weren't answering. I wanted to know what you wanted for dinner. And I was like, well, I was practicing. I told you I was going to be practicing, And I stopped right then, and I'm like, oh, this could be a real big problem. Because I was so accustomed to being able to plug in for 3-4 hours and just do this thing and be uninterrupted. I didn't have email. All that stuff was at a computer way far away. Even on my break time and my practice time, I would plan household chores around it because I didn't own a computer until I graduated college. I was poor. I couldn't afford one. They were popular. Everybody had one. But you're like, Steven, like YouTube was around and I was just buying a computer because I couldn't afford one, right? And so I didn't have them in the house. And so I would sweep the floor and do the dishes and then go back to practicing. It was a completely mindless thing that I could do. Physical activity helped me regain focus. There are studies and books on that. And then I went back to doing what I was going to do. There are a couple of things, while we're talking about that, there's a couple of things that help us regain focus. And that is physical activity and breath work will help you do that. And so going on a walk, doing some stretching, something like that, doing some chores that don't really, there's no thinking involved. I'm just doing the laundry or I'm sweeping the floor. Those all actually help reset our focus. Being in nature is another one. So just even looking at pictures of nature. Okay, so why am I rambling on about this? What I'm saying is this used to not be as big of a problem it is now. If you're a club drummer and you go play in clubs, there's going to be TVs everywhere. And I found myself one night on Bourbon Street watching TV while I was playing. And I was like, wait a second. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the the drummer that's worked so hard to be able to do this full time, and I go to work and I zone out and I spend all of my time watching TV with no sound on because we play these songs every night. I want to be plugged in. I want to play the best of my ability because that's how I'm going to get to the next level. That's how I'm going to get the next gig, right? And so I made it a point that night. I ignored the TVs. So what we have to do is we have to limit the number of distractions that we're letting in. So for me, my phone, I don't have notifications for social media that come through. I have them all in one folder, and if I want to go check social media, I go to that folder and check social media all at once. That's why if you message me on Facebook, you probably don't hear back from me immediately. I also don't have notifications come to my phone when I get an email. The email is in another folder, and my whole phone is foldered. I'll show you this. It drives some people nuts. But my whole phone is foldered. So these are all folders, and they have like 15, 20 apps in each, and each folder is labeled something, and I don't have, you can't swipe. It's just one thing. Like that's the only thing you can do there. And you go in there, and then I have this, and it reminds me, create more than you consume, right? Because I want to be a creator. And so if I'm consuming, notifications are coming in to me and interrupting my day. If I'm creating, I'm building a wall and keeping all of that at bay, so that I can have my space. We have to protect this space that we work in and that we create in. It's very, very important. And if you do that, you'll get better at focusing like that because you've eliminated those distractions. The other thing I don't do is I don't check email right before I'm going on stage. I don't check social media before I go on stage because what's going to happen? We have external distractions. That is someone walks in the door and, hey, my kids, hey, Dad, I need you. External distraction. You hear a noise, someone knocks on the door, you have to go answer it. You hear the laundry buzz, that it's time to put it into the dryer. External distraction. And what many external distractions do is turn into internal distractions. Someone's at the door knocking. I'm going to ignore it. You keep playing. I wonder who that was at the door. I wonder if I should let me go check the cameras. Let me see I wonder who that was. You distract yourself so you'd be better off just go answer the door. Because at that point, you're in a state of internal distraction caused by an external distraction. Then we have internal distractions that we distract ourselves with. The brain is a great place to have ideas. It's an awful place to store them. So try to keep a notes app or keep a notepad where when you have a thought, you write it down. I have task lists. I function a ton in Google Drive, and I have folders. Like my life is foldered when it comes to what I want to do because it helps me at even creative things. I've got a creative project every Thursday. We rehearse and we write and we record. I have a folder for it, and I can go to it. I have all the lyrics. I have folders for lyrics. I have folders for ideas we record. I have folders for finished songs. I have what are we doing with I have all that in that place. So get it out of your brain so that you stop distracting yourself. Same thing on the gig. If you have something that's distracting you, there's nothing wrong with keeping a notepad beside you and jotting that down. We do this by our bedside. Jot it down. Why? Because then your brain lets go of it. The only reason it's reminding you is because it doesn't want you to forget. But if the brain knows you've stored the information somewhere that you can go back and get it, the brain relaxes. All it wants to do is remind you. And so our brains are great at understanding where to find information. So that's one thing that you can do is when you're practicing, when you're on the gig, keep a notepad. But the reason I say a notepad on the gig is because nobody likes looking up to the stage and seeing a musician do this. It looks awful, y'all, unless it's very clear that you are using that technology as a part of your setup. But at no point should there be a reason why you're typing a thesis on your phone in the middle of your set. Right? We have to understand this looks rude. When you're in the crowd, it gives them the idea that this is more important than what you're doing with them. They have done was it Brain Games? Or was it a book I was reading? I forget. But they did a study on people that dated, putting the phone face down on the table next to them, not even on their table. Limited how deep they felt the conversation went. They did this repeatedly with different couples. It limited that. So when I'm with my wife, the phone is nowhere in sight. Sometimes I'll give it to her and say, please put that somewhere where I can't see it. If we're on a date and I can't, I've left it at restaurants before because I put it under my chair. I don't want anything to distract between this, what's happening between her and I. It's the same thing with the gig. Replace her with the gig whenever I'm on the gig. Don't replace her with the gig. But you see what I'm saying? Instead of it being between me and her, it's between me and the musicians on stage. It's between me and the audience. And I want the audience to understand that I'm there 100% trying to give my all for that. And to do that, I have to set up all these guardrails around that time. And we do that by limiting notifications, limiting external distractions. The reason I liked going through, there's a video on my YouTube channel, my main YouTube channel. It's just a point of view, me walking through my day and setting up when I was on tour. I would spend about 45 minutes with my drum set every day. Why? Because I liked setting it up. I liked making sure there were no problems. You know, the thing I don't like is having a cymbal cracked and I didn't know it because I didn't spend time with it. It's having a stand that's too far this way and so it messes up my whole night. Like, I want to check those things and limit the external distractions that are going to distract me during my gig. And only whenever I was like, okay, cool, I think I'm good here, I would get up and be good for the gig. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't mind doing that. I wanted to have everything set up just right, and that limited the external distractions. Then I deal with the internal distractions of, I'm not going to check email right before I go on stage. A lot of times I would text my wife and say, hey, about to go on stage, love you a lot, I'll text you after the show. So that she knows I'm not there. She knows where I am, and she knows at that time, like, I don't need to be messaging her. You know him, he's working right now. Same thing with the kids, like, hey, don't message your dad. Like, and so, I set up those rules and parameters for the people that I love too, so they know, like, it's not that he doesn't want to talk to me. I'm going to frustrate him if I interrupt him right now because he's trying to work and make a living for us, right? And so it's taken years and years of, like, when I see that, I go, okay, how can I limit this distraction for my professional life, but it also services my personal life too. It's doing no one a favor at work if you're thinking about work emails while you're playing the drums at a gig on the weekend. It does no one at work any favors because you're just frustrated. You're not going to come up with the best solution. If you do, write it down. Get back to it later when you can really type up that email. If somebody makes you mad, definitely don't type it up and send the email. Type the email up and read it the next day, and then maybe wait and then read it again and then probably delete it, right? Like, we're too quick to respond with things. And what we do is we train people. Oh, they're by their phone. They're going to, start waiting a little while to respond to people. Start telling them, hey, sorry about that. I didn't have my phone with me. And they start understanding, yeah, he'll get back to me when he's going to get back to me. He's one of those people that doesn't have his phone on him all the time. This podcast is brought to you by the Drum Better Daily program. That's actually my online drum school that I've run now for 12 plus years. Not only have I been playing the drums professionally since the age of 15, I've been teaching since the age of 18. Matter of fact, I talked to one of my first student a few days ago. I actually called him to see if he could sub a gig out for me. Daniel, love you, man. And he's still playing. He's still doing it on a pro level. I would love to have you go check it out at stevensdrumshed.com. You can find a link to that in the show notes or video description, whichever platform you're watching it on. But it truly is a community of like-minded drummers where we are striving to just be the best that we can be at the drums. In addition to over 70 pre-recorded drum courses, there's also a tech talk area where we talk about everything technology related as it pertains to the drums, e-kits, recording, doing videos, all of that stuff. There are forums where you can hang out with the other students as well. We do 2 live video student calls every week that you can join if you'd like to. We do guest artist calls monthly, and I'll even make you a personalized lesson plan if that's what you need. Yes, we talk about the nuts and bolts of drumming. Yes, I give you exercises, but we also talk a lot about how to practice more efficiently, how to practice better, and how to get more out of your practice time. I know you're just like me. You're busy, you're being pulled by work, by family, by friends, by other responsibilities. Whenever you practice, you really want to see gains and have it be productive. That is what we focus on in the Drum Better Daily program. I'll have to say personally, it's been really cool because some of these students I've worked with for over 12 years, we started running drum camps last year in 2022, and I got to meet some of them in person for the first time. Those drum camps have been selling out. They've been just blowing my mind with how much fun they are and how great a time it is to bring the community together in person. A community that was started online and has been going online strong now for over 12 years. I'd love to have you be a part of it. So when it comes to the gig, limiting the internal distractions, limiting the external distractions helps us focus more. Then all we have to deal with is that time on stage when our mind does start to wander. So somebody's doing something crazy in the crowd. Okay, redirect your focus. Somebody's doing it, redirect your focus. And if we train ourselves enough to do this, that's whenever we start getting better at doing it. And there's some things you can do during the day that really, really help this. So you're standing in line at your favorite coffee shop. What's the first thing that we usually do? I make it a point when I'm out to not do that. I make it a point to deal with the fact that I'm standing in a line and I don't have anything to do. Oh my! And in your brain, you're freaking out. It's like, grab the phone, grab the phone, grab the phone, do it. You know you want to do it, right? It's going through our heads. And then we grab the phone and we give ourselves that little dopamine hit. That's all it is. It's a feedback loop that we've created. So what I do is I ignore that. And I look around, and maybe I'll look at some of the product they got sitting on the shelves. Maybe I'll talk to the person in front of me. Ever thought about doing that? We used to do that all the time. There was an episode of The Office that came on, and I'm not railing against technology. I'm telling you, you have to take steps to protect your work and your craft and your art, or it'll take it from you. I get real worried about the generation coming up now. My kids, 16 and 18 and younger. It's almost like we've eliminated boredom. And let me tell you something. Some of my best ideas come from when I'm bored. Some of my worst ideas come from when I'm bored too. But some of my best ideas, all the time I spent on the drums, I was bored. I was like, well, I don't have anything else to do. I'm going to go practice again. All the reading I did, I was bored. All the playing outside, my mom would kick me outside. She'd lock the door. She's like, go outside. Now they call it child abuse. She just called it like, you need to go experience the world. And I did. I have so many great memories of being like, okay, while I'm out here, I might as well find something to do, right? Allow time in your day for you to have to physically deal with boredom, because that's what's happening on your gig. There's nothing new that's come through, or the only new things that are coming through are things you're really having to dissect and think through, and your brain wants a break from it. It wants a cookie. So you get a cookie. There's a TV and you're watching an old episode of Cheers, or you're watching, some reality show. You're watching the news. God forbid we do that while we're playing, right? It's a cookie for your brain, and it allows it to check out, and it doesn't have to think. It doesn't have to think. So that's another, people that watch multiple 5, 6, 7 hours of TV, they get off work, they just go home, turn the TV on. What's so bad about that? Nothing, except there's a lot of life that can happen between that time. Does that mean I never watch TV? No, I watch it regularly. I might watch an hour or so at night with my wife, or the kids may want to come in and watch a show, but it's not my default. When my family leaves for a week, sometimes they'll leave to go visit her family or something. It sounds bad. When I leave for a week, when they're finally fed up with me and they get out, like when they leave for a week, the TV rarely comes on. And if it comes on, it's usually a documentary, or I have several movies that I'll go back to and watch for inspiration. Something Life of Walter Mitty. I can never even remember it. It's the Life of Walter Mitty. It's the updated version. Man, it was so inspiring. I watch that one once or twice a year. That's the stuff I watch. Documentaries on like how my food's processed or something like that. A music documentary. Or I look up stuff for work. Like that's how I'm interfacing with screens. And so we have to make it the norm that our brain doesn't get distracted. The first week, it's real hard. The second week, it's not so hard. By the third week, you start hitting a real nice, wow, things are quiet and I can think and my head's clear, because I can't stand getting on, a screen or a phone and there's this jumbled feeling that my brain has from going through 83 pages in 2 seconds. And it's this scattered, distracted feeling. And we have to understand what it feels like to sink into a subject in a project. So the group I was out for about a year and a half, every night, like it was Southern rock, and this was not, it wasn't math rock, right? So I was playing a lot of simplistic stuff, but it was to convey the song. And my goal was that I was 100% present there every night. Did I hit that goal? No. Did I have nights where I made more mistakes? Yeah, that's always going to happen. It's always going to happen, right? Was it really a mistake, or was it just kind of a thing that happened and no one heard it? You just viewed it that way. That's another thing. So we have to record ourselves to understand that. But when it comes to limiting the amount that we are distracted on the stage, that starts before you get to the stage. That starts with your warm-up. Why do we take the time to do a warm-up? Why do we take if you came on the bus before one of our shows, this band didn't party a lot. Not that if you like partying, that's fine. That's whatever you want to do. Most of us would lay in our bunks for about an hour. If not, I would go off somewhere by myself, and I might work for a little while. Just do something kind of mindless, relax. I may go walk. Tyler, our guitar player, he loved getting his bunk. I don't know if he actually took a nap, but he would do Wim Hof deep breathing as well. And so everybody had their like different ritual, and then we'd get up about 15 minutes before we were supposed to be on stage, and everybody be getting dressed, and that was kind of how everybody set their time. You have to have these rituals that help you prepare and trigger your body for it's time for the gig. It's time for your practice time. That way, no matter if the venue has changed, your routine is the same. So it can be something as mundane as 15 minutes before I go on stage, I go through this warm-up sequence. I do this number of stretches. I do that, like I put my playing on air and do it in the same sequence. Because what that does is it starts triggering your body. And by the time you get to stage, you're like, and now it's showtime. Michael Phelps did this whenever he was racing, still races, I guess. His coach said, I think the book it was in was Daily Habits. Maybe it wasn't that book. Anyway, I've got it printed off somewhere. And he said, if you ask Michael what's going through his head before a race, he'll tell you, nothing really. But he said he's ingrained in himself so much this routine that it's automatic. I do this when this 2 hours before the race. Then I do this many laps, and then I do this, and then I listen to this song, and then I do these stretches. Watch him every time he gets onto the podium. That year that he had that huge, suite with the medals, watch him. Every time he got up, he will do the same thing. Why? It's a routine. And the coach said, and after the race, he has a routine too. And he said, the thing is, and visualization was part of it. And he said, the thing is the race was just in the middle of the routine. It wasn't the whole event. The event was the routine and the race was part of it, right? But the race wasn't the only thing. He said, so if you've done all these tasks, you've listened to this song exactly when you thought you would, you did these stretches and they went how, you did this, everything has gone according to plan. He said, if you've been visualizing planning, it's just going to be the next thing that we do, right? It's a given. I did all this other stuff right. I think I'm going to win too. Now, is that why he won? No, but it's part of it. You have to look at those things and go, I wonder. So you look at these elite performers and you find that they're very, very good. I believe it was a MMA fighter. Maybe he was in BJJ, great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I forget what he was. He's one of the number one fighters. And before he would go on, he would be laying there sleeping. And then it was like right when it was time for him to go on, boom, he would wake up and he was ready to tear somebody up. Why? That was his routine. He had trained himself that I'm not tired after this nap. This nap is what I do. And then I'm woke up and I'm a bear coming at you, right? So the routine's very important. And I think to eliminate these distractions, all of this rambling, let's get some bullet points that we can do, that we can use to eliminate the distractions when we're on the gig or we're in our practice time. Okay, the first thing is limit the external distractions that will later turn into internal distractions. If I'm walking to my practice room and I pass things, I'm going to limit. Maybe I don't walk past the laundry room. Maybe I'll close the door. Maybe that's a discussion you need to have with your kids or your wife. And these are good discussions like, honey, I actually want to get in and get out of my practice in the time I said I would, and I want it to be a good time, and I want to come out, but sometimes I get frustrated because there's so many distractions. Would it be okay if before I practice, I just told you I'm going to practice, and then you kind of write down whatever you need to tell me and tell me afterwards? Have this discussion. But don't go in there arguing. And there may be several discussions you have to have with people that limits the external distractions. Then we deal with the internal distractions, turning off the notifications on the phone, putting it on airplane mode, not checking email before we go to practice, those types of things. Having a routine that will get us into our practice time. The routine can be anything, but we are very, very routine-driven people. Right? It is going to be a signal that we need, a trigger that we need to go. Then we have the activity and we have the reward. This is really how we work: trigger, activity, reward, and it's a habit loop. And so, if we can ingrain good habits, we're going to focus more. Then, when we're in there, then it's a matter of training ourselves to, like the email said, like you learned from Max's DVD, when you notice yourself drifting, recenter yourself. And you may have to do this 54 times within a session. Sometimes I will find that actually putting my drumsticks down, putting my hands down by my side, shaking them, taking a couple deep breaths, closing my eyes, and recentering myself, and then I grab the sticks again. It's almost like a fresh start for me. I'll do that several times during a set because I kind of just need to okay, hold up. I'm getting a little distracted, frustrated. Okay, let's do this next song, right? So I kind of reset. Closing the eyes is kind of a visual thing of like, okay, get it together, and we're in the next song, right? So that helps me do that. And then during our day, get into the pattern of regularly putting yourself in a distraction-free environment and dealing with the boredom that comes with that. And when you are triggered to go do this thing or do that or interrupt yourself, don't give in to it. Say, you know what? I'm consciously saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to grab the phone right now. I'm not going to call that person back. There's nothing that says you have to answer the phone because someone calls you. There's nothing that says you have to respond right then to a text message because someone texted you. You can write down on your little notes app, need to respond to text from Charlie. Done. Then you look at, oh yeah, I got to respond to that text from Charlie. You're not going to forget it, right? So your brain's not going to remind you, need to call back Sarah, need to call back Susie, need to call back John, whatever that looks like. But write yourself those reminders and where you can find that information so that your brain lets it go. Anything that's going on in your brain, get it out on paper or in a notes app. And that way we start to limit these distractions. And this allows us to focus better in our practice time, in our relationships, in our work time, and on the gig. And I promise you, if you will do this for a few weeks and start working, because you're going to have what I call practice killers or gig killers, it's going to be repeated things that happen that trigger you to become distracted. Okay, one of them, when I get a text message, I feel like I need to respond. How do we fix that on the gig? Turn your phone on airplane mode. Easy. When I check my email and see there's one that needs to be responded to, I respond to it. Okay. Don't check your email before you got to go on, right? It's easy. Like, don't do that. When I do this, when I go in and my drum set's not tuned, I get frustrated. Okay, we'll go in, tune for 3 minutes, then do some type of warm up, then go into your practice. Or maybe tune after you get done playing so that the next day the drum set's ready for you. If I'm doing a recording session in here or I'm doing some videos, I will come in a lot of times the day before, or if I'm recording in the afternoon, I'll come in that morning. I'll set everything, cameras, everything like that. I'm done. And then I come back. This morning I set it up right before I did this because it was the weekend, and I was coming into it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't like doing that because if there's technology problems, that derails my brain, right? So we just have to be very careful about curating our time and protecting it. And if you do that, you will get better at focusing. And it's not just redirect your focus. That's one of the things. But we live in a interruption-driven society. So we have to learn how to deal with that in a better way. So hopefully that helps you. If you need some help with your drumming, I'd love to have you in the Drum Better Daily program. There's a 14-day free trial. You can check out the link in the video description, or if you're watching this on the or listening to this on the podcast, it's going to be on the podcast description. There's tons of free resources on the website too. I would love to have you in the program. And if you always have, as you know, this email. If you have a question, email help@stevensdrumshed.com. I may read it on the podcast. That's what this podcast is for, to answer your questions.